Our August edition of Artifacts has a decidedly ethnic flavor.
As we welcome guests of Finnish, Asian, Scottish, and cyberspacian heritage.
Cyberspacian? One of our guests is from cyberspace?
Well, not exactly, but we will be talking internet during the show.
You talk internet?
Don't you?
No, but somehow we'll manage, I'm sure.
We always do. And as always, we've got a terrific show lined up.
Well, stay tuned to hear much more about our great guests in just under 30 seconds.
Artifacts is next. Far out, down to earth, and rich in variety. That's Artifacts for August. Hello everybody, I'm Janet Zahn with the Office of Film, Video, and Recording.
And I'm Phill Lindsay with the Minneapolis Community Development Agency. And my first guest today could be described as down to earth. She's Wynne Mattila, a rug weaver who is of Finnish descent and an accomplished artisan. You'll see some samples of her beautiful rug work.
Then Phill welcomes David Fryxell, who is the executive producer of Twin Cities Sidewalk, an internet-based guide to the arts and entertainment in the Twin Cities.
Now that would be the far out segment of the show.
And that would be true, yes.
Okay.
And then Angie Hwong, the executive director of Asian Media Access, will be joining me for a look at the exciting and ambitious programs of that organization. She's also bringing along some great Asian movie clips that you won't want to miss.
Then the flavor of the show turns decidedly Scottish as I welcome Florence Hart. She's here to tell us about the Minnesota Scottish Celtic Dance Association.
We'll add some French flavor too with a clip from a performance of the Mallet workshop.
And you'll get a peek at the Lion King at the Orpheum as well.
All this plus the great Artifacts giveaway, which this month is the fabulous Asian Media Access CalcuPen.
Yes, a novelty if I've ever seen one.
Indeed.
Now all you have to be is the 7th through the 11th caller, because this is so cool, we're going to give away 5 of these.
Yeah, and look, it's got a calculator and 5 beautiful pens, including a yellow highlighter.
That's right, and the calculator actually works. Now just call the City Cable 34 hotline at 673-2234.
And don't forget to leave your name, address, and phone number.
Yeah, we need all those things.
On the voicemail.
5 of them we're giving away. Now, stay tuned for my first guest, rug weaver Wynne Mattila, right after this clip from the world premiere stage production of The Lion King, playing through August 31st at the historic Orpheum Theater in downtown Minneapolis.
Step into the sun. There is more to see than can ever be seen, more to do than can ever be done. There is far too much to take in here, more to find than can ever be found. But the sun rolling high through the sapphire sky keeps great and small on these endless round. It's a circle of life, it's a soul to despair and hope, faith and love, till we find our place on the path that widens in the circle of life.
Well, The Lion King is looking like the king of the box office with first day single ticket sales of over $1 million. That's a Twin Cities box office record. Now, my next guest is a rug weaver, and I'm excited to have her on. Wynne Mattila, thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me.
Oh, this is going to be great. We've had a lot of guests on that have done different kinds of artwork on the show, but we've never had a rug weaver. And as we were sitting down to talk, you've been introducing me to terms and to materials that I'm completely unfamiliar with. Let's just start with some basics. What kind of weaving do you do, Wynne?
I'm a rug weaver, and I weave 2 kinds of rugs. Wool rugs, which are considered weft-faced rugs, and rag rugs, which are rugs that you see both the warp and the weft. weft.
Okay, now in a moment I want you to actually show us the difference between the warp and the weft. 'Cause
Okay.
that's a distinction. I guess I've heard the terms, but I wasn't familiar with what they were. I also wanted to point out that something I read, and you told me that you have a Finnish background, and that informs part of what you do. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I grew up in a small town with lots of people that had come from Finland. And on our floors, when I grew up, we had hardwood floors with rag rugs. So I've always been interested in what has been on the floor. And traditionally, rag rugs were made with old clothing, shirts, dresses, pants, cut into strips, and it was one more way to use the material. And when you weave like that, you get a very soft, muted sense of what's happening in a rug because you're using soft, old fabrics.
Right.
So I've always wanted to weave rugs. And
So this started out as a young girl. You knew you wanted to get into this.
I wanted to, but I didn't for a very, very, very long time. I really haven't been weaving rugs just basically for the last 5 or 6 years. Although I did took my first weaving class back in the mid-'70s. But in order to weave a rug, you really need a rug loom.
Right.
And that's key to weaving a good, sturdy rug.
One of the things that you brought is what I might call a model, although it's technically a working model here. Can you talk about this loom and what the elements to it are?
Okay, in this loom, the strings running this way, this is considered the warp.
Okay.
The weft is the material that goes back and forth. In this case, the yellow and the red.
Okay.
And this is just a very small model. My loom is actually 4 feet wide and it's taller than I am.
Wow.
So it's a big loom. But in essence, what happens when you weave, this is called the beater. And when you bring this forward and pack in your weft, you're actually weaving. And to change what is considered a shed on this loom, this brings some of the loops up and some of the loops down.
Very interesting.
And by raising this, what's considered, this is your shed, by sliding one of your shuttles through this shed and then beating it in, you're weaving.
Okay.
And then the next time you change your shed, you come through on the other side and you're weaving. You're creating cloth or rugs or whatever you want. So we have a red and a yellow. You beat it in, that's weaving. This is the weft, this is the warp. These are called shuttles.
Right. Now, as we were setting up here, you pointed out, and I learned this just recently, that beating, actually, there's a tremendous effort that goes into that and a certain amount of noise that is made.
Right, if you're weaving rugs, yes.
If you're making the rugs, okay.
Right. If you're weaving fine curtains or lace fabric, you're in essence just very gently placing that. But if you're a rug weaver, it's a pretty noisy operation.
Okay, so
and consequently, that's why you need a sturdy loom if you're weaving rugs.
Right, because there's a lot of torque going
Right.
on to the actual
Right.
apparatus. Very interesting distinction there. So that with the finer materials, it's a more of a gentle process, but with the rug, you actually put some muscle
Right,
into
I
that.
beat as hard as I can.
Wow, so you're in shape.
Right.
That's great. Well, thank you for showing that. Now, you also brought some of the materials you use, or examples of the skein here. Why don't you just show us what you brought?
This is what's called a skein of yarn. And in the rug behind me, this was the weft that I used to weave that rug. It's a 3-ply, 100% wool. And what you do is you wind it on a shuttle, and this is the wooden part under here. This is a shuttle.
Okay.
So you wind your wool or your fabric on the shuttle, and it's what goes back and forth.
Sure. Now, where does
To
the
weave.
wool come from? Do you, as a weaver, do you care, or is it simply whatever's available?
No, I use a very high-quality wool yarn, which I get from a company in Maine.
Okay, so not something just off the shelf.
No,
you
you
have a
can. That's a
particular-
great way to learn with some mill ends. But I'm a believer that if you're weaving a rug, you should use the highest quality materials that you can, and craftsmanship-wise, you should just be trying to achieve perfection, although you never get there. I'm a believer that craftsmanship and quality are of the utmost importance.
That makes sense. How long does it take to weave something, say, like the rug behind you?
The rug behind me would have taken me about 35 to 40 hours. Now that's not something that I would do in 1 week, but it's something that 35 to 40 hours. I can weave probably comfortably 5 hours a day because it's physically a lot of work.
From what you were saying,
right,
yes, you're
beyond that, if
exerting.
I'm doing more than sitting at that loom, actually weaving more than 5 hours a day, I get really sore. But I'm talking about weaving time. There's other time in winding your shuttles, designing your rugs, finishing your ends, all of that
I
sort
want
of
to
thing.
ask about designing it. I think it's something I read about you. You start with color. At least
I
that's
start
one of
with
the
color.
principal things. Why color?
I love color. What I actually do is I start with skeins of yarn that I think I want to use. I line them up in some color sequence that I like, and over the course of a few days or a week, I'll take the skeins, redo the order, add something, take something out. My eye has to be excited by what I see happening with color. I'm very affected by color no matter where I go, what I do.
Is that kind of unusual? I mean, do most weavers start with that, or do they just start with a design, or is there a pattern that they've had?
Lots of people start with design. I'm primarily driven by color.
Okay, and then how do you further the design process? I mean, obviously you don't just start from scratch. You have some idea, and then do you improvise, as it were, as you go on and carry it from there? How do you keep track of the different
Well, every time I do a
patterns?
rug, I keep records of what I do because that helps the next time in the amount of materials that you need, how long it takes you, how much yarn you would use
Right.
if you wanted to do a particular repeat in a certain color. So I pick out my colors. And then I decide the weave structure that I want to do. Now, the weave structure behind me is a croquebrog rug. It's a traditional Scandinavian rug. And I've woven this rug. It's one of my favorites. The first wool rug I ever made was a croquebrog rug. And there's many ways you can do this. You can, with that weave structure, you actually could create people. You could create tulips with leaves. But I like the interlacement of what I call the fingers and how the colors interact with each other. What happens is we're looking at a skein of yarn. It has a lot of color. If you look at the impact of this color in the rug, you're seeing one little dot in the back.
Yes.
So what might look like purple when you mix it in with pinks or oranges, it's going to change the color.
A little bit like pointillism or something. It adds up
Part
to a
of why I
larger-
like working with colors, you can start with a color, but you can turn it into something else.
Okay, so it's a palette of color.
Right.
Wynne, we're just out of time. I want to thank you very much for giving us the shortest short course on rug weaving.
Thanks
Thank
so
you very
much.
much. Pleasure to have you here. Now, David Fryxell is up next with a look at Twin Cities Sidewalk, right after this clip from a performance by the Mallet Workshop. Stay tuned.
It took the coming together of several things for the group to get here. It started with a CD being given to us 2 years ago with the suggestion that we invite them over to play for us, and then getting that CD in the hands of someone else who could listen to it, think about it, and ultimately gelling into an exchange program between Mallet Workshop and a group called the Rim Shops, a group of young percussionists at the McPhail Center for the Arts, who will be going over to France next year.
Very fun because we have different styles of music from South America, African, and the classic the classic style.
When we begin to learn percussion, we begin to learn snare, drums, and timpani. And And after 3 years, we began to learn this instrument. And when we go in orchestra, we have not the possibility to play very classical music. And we found this orchestra, we have made this Mallet workshop to use quality of the instrument and to play very velocity, very music, other music, not classical music.
Well, that was a little sample of some of the music that Mallet Workshop brought to town last month. They're from our sister city of Tours, France. Ed Coughlin worked very hard for a couple of years to bring them in town. And interestingly, this month in August, he's also got another French group, Kosh Kosh, who will be around the Twin Cities. They're a little more hard driving, a little more world beat in their music. But I urge you to find out about Kosh Kosh, and thanks to Ed Coughlin on that. Well, my next guest is a gentleman who has helped start up a new enterprise here in the Twin Cities. It is Twin Cities Sidewalk. I want to welcome David Fryxell.
Thanks for having me.
Executive producer?
Correct.
I've got that right, okay. Now, you know obviously because you're working there, I've been reading up on Twin Cities Sidewalk, and I think within the industry there's quite a buzz, but some of our viewers may not know what Twin Cities Sidewalk is. I'll let you explain.
Well, Twin Cities Sidewalk is a personalized, customized guide to arts and entertainment and events in the Twin Cities. So it's available free on the internet, 24 hours a day at twincities.sidewalk.com. And what we found basically was that, and we did some research and some focus groups and so forth to find out, but this will sound familiar to you, people just don't have enough time these days. They're working harder. They don't have the time to plan events. You know, by the time you get around to planning the weekend, it's Sunday and the weekend's half gone. Mm-hmm. And yet in the Twin Cities, there's so many things to do. You know, we've got one of the best theater scenes in town, in the entire country, thousands of restaurants, sporting events, the whole,
I think the
scene.
word is plethora. I mean,
exactly.
Far too many things to choose from.
And what happens is that either people can't choose because there are so many choices, or they miss things that they might have wanted to see because they didn't find out about it until it was too late.
Right.
And so what Sidewalk does is it tries to take the work out of having fun. It's kind of a virtual entertainment advisor. So it covers everything from arts and music to restaurants and sports and recreation. Pretty much anything there is to do in the Twin Cities.
I noticed in some of your materials that even you can set up tea times.
That's right. We've got maps of more than 400 golf courses because of our that vigorous four-season climate. It's a we're a big state for golf, and you can even reserve a tea time online.
That's amazing. And one thing that needs to be said is Microsoft is the entity behind this.
That's right. We're the fourth city to go online with a project called Sidewalk Project. And what Microsoft really did was come to the Twin Cities and apply that cutting-edge Microsoft technology on the internet with a local staff of experts. Mm-hmm. We've really attracted sort of the big names across the scene.
Good point. Let's talk a little bit about that because the content's only as good as the folks that are putting the content there on the screens. I know you have a background in print journalism, and it seems like a fair number of the staff come out of print. And you've got some partners working with you as well. Do you want to kind of give us the array of who is the Twin Cities Sidewalk staff?
Sure. The staff, the editorial staff includes people like Pat McMorrow, who was arts and entertainment editor at the Pioneer Press and helped them win a bunch of awards. Gail Cooper, who was restaurant editor at Mattila St. Paul, really knows restaurants better than anybody in the town. And then we've got doing writing for us, people like Hart is covering theater for us. Keith Moore, who was music editor of Rolling Stone, is back in town and is covering pop music for us. Sylvia Payne, who was restaurant critic at Mattila St. Paul, is our lead restaurant reviewer. We've also got partnerships with City Pages, The Edge, KQ, and X105, sort of giving us information ranging from listings to what's hot and
I think
pop
that's
music.
an important point, that it's more than just a calendar listing.
Right.
You've got critics that are writing reviews of some of these things that people can choose to go and see.
Right. It really, tries to help consumers make decisions. So we've got everything from the basic listings information to combining that really so that, for example, we'll help you find a play or a concert or movie to go to. But we'll also, once you've found that, we'll help you pick a restaurant nearby. We'll tell you, is the restaurant Skyway accessible so you don't have to go out in the snow? Does it have an ATM machine so that if you're going to a movie and they only take cash, is your evening going to be ruined?
Now tell me this is actually name the valet who's going to park your car.
Not quite. We will tell you if there's valet parking, though.
Could say that. All right.
And of course, we'd help you pick your seat at the place like the Guthrie or the
so you could
Orpheum.
reserve tickets off of this?
We will link you to places where you can
link
do
over
that.
to that.
Right.
And that raises the question, sounds like a great, useful service. What does the average consumer need in order to do this? I mean, first of all, you've got to have a computer sitting somewhere.
Right.
What else do you have to have?
Anybody with any kind of internet access can access sidewalk.com.
Okay.
It's free on the internet. Just typing in twincities.sidewalk.com will get you there.
Okay, now for the user, the consumer here calls us up, makes use of this. Free to them, how do you guys, you're not doing this for the out of the goodness of your hearts. I mean, there's got to be some cash involved here. How do you make money on this?
It's entirely advertising supported.
Okay, so what will people see, like banners, advertising banners?
They'll see some advertising banners and then some ads down the side. But just like newspapers or TV,
magazines.
It's the editorial and the advertising are completely independent.
Okay, well, and speaking of what people will see, you were kind enough to bring a little clip here of some of the pages, at least the first few pages. You just want to talk us through real quickly on what people will see when they get over to Twin Cities Sidewalk.
Well, at sidewalk.com, the basic page that you come to first is the home page, the Today page. And if you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you see here will be personalized just for you. So your events will be along the side rather than just a place where it says customized.
Let me interrupt for a second then. If I say, somehow communicate that I'm particularly interested in jazz, that can...
Not only will it appear down the side, but the events menu page will be, particularly for you, it will say Phil's Picks. It'll also say Sidewalk's Choices. And we'll send you an email telling you that a new jazz group is coming to the Dakota.
Right.
And if you tell us even somebody you particularly follow, if you're really a Kurt Elling fan, then when we have news that Kurt Elling is coming to town, we'll send you a special email saying, "Hey Phil, your fave is coming to town."
Well, that's great. Now, I interrupted. Now that's your first front page there.
Right. Then we cover arts and music. So here we've got, in addition to all the events kind of coverage, we've got guides to the Orpheum, the Guthrie, all the really key places in town, the Walker Arts Center, seating charts, background, in addition to having an interview with Joe Dowling at the Guthrie. We've got sound clips so you can hear Joe Dowling talking about what's new at the Guthrie.
Interesting.
Then we cover also restaurants.
Right.
We've sent people out to review literally hundreds of restaurants, rated them 1 to 4 stars, and tell you, in really colorful detail, what do you need to know to have a good time at this restaurant? Is it something that you would enjoy?
So this goes back to your editorial independence, though, because you are going to have reviewers that are saying, the meatloaf isn't so good here, or this play maybe shouldn't have too long legs here.
Absolutely. We had very high standards, and really only a handful of restaurants got our top ratings. We also have things like, is the restaurant Skyway accessible? Is it good for groups? Sidewalk will tell you, is it kid-friendly? Is it a place you'd feel comfortable taking your kids?
All right.
And then we cover sports and recreation on Sidewalk, so that it's really with a very heavy recreation focus. So Sidewalk will tell you the 5 best places to golf after work, where they're close enough so that you can get to them without making the boss mad.
This sounds obviously information heavy. You've got to have a lot of facts in here. How often do you update this? Is this an ongoing thing? How do you do that?
It's updated constantly. There's something new on the site every day at sidewalk.com. And we're constantly, adding new restaurants. We've already got, well over 1,000, more than 600 with reviews, and we're sending people out there to eat more all the time.
Right. Well, now you just opened up last month, early in July. Any early numbers in terms of how many, hits you're getting? How many people are making use of this?
So far, the response has been great. It's early to tell, and we don't really have solid numbers yet, but both with advertising and with usage, there's been a lot of interest. I think because there's really that consumer need for help in making decisions that we think Sidewalk addresses.
Sure. I know in TV, demographics are important. Is that part of the mix that you're hoping, because you have to go out to the advertisers and sell them on who's going to be tuning in here. Who do you expect is going to make use of this?
Well, obviously the demographics are attractive, but what's really the key for Sidewalk is getting to consumers at that point when they're making decisions. When they're saying, you know, what should we do tonight, honey? Do we just want to do takeout? We're looking for that person who's going to say, well, let's check Sidewalk, we'll get a quick answer. Maybe check Sidewalk before going home and find a restaurant where we can meet at.
So what you're saying is they can be sitting at their desk at 4:30 ready to go home. They can do that kind of check, or once they get together when they get home, they can say, oh, now let's check it out. So it's as long as you've got a hookup to the internet,
right,
you can do this.
Sidewalk tries to give you, the information you need right now and information both breadth and depth. So if you want more, we'll give you more and more and more and more and more.
Right, you keep going deeper into it. We've got time for maybe one more question, and I'm sure you're aware of this fact that when Microsoft announced that they were going to come to town and probably do this, I think blood pressure spiked at about half a dozen local providers of similar, maybe not exactly the same, but similar kinds of services. How do you see yourself fitting in here, and how long do you think it would take Twin Cities Sidewalk to really establish itself?
Well, I think the key is that we hired local experts at Sidewalk, so we know the town. We're not people from outside, even though the company is Microsoft. And we're really a different kind of product. Sidewalk really aims to help consumers make those choices about arts and music and sports and recreation and restaurants. And so we sort of see ourselves in a niche that really didn't exist before, but that we think is a real need for a product like Sidewalk.
And time frame, I mean, when will you be able to look back and say, yeah, we're there? I mean, do you think this is a 1 year, a 5 year kind of thing?
Oh, no idea. The internet's changing so quickly.
Yeah, it grows.
That who would have thought we'd be here today with something like Sidewalk even a year ago. So we're just waiting to see and excited to see what the response to something like Sidewalk is.
David, thanks for sharing a little bit about Sidewalk. Just as we go, why don't you rattle off that address one more time for Twin Cities Sidewalk?
It's just twincities.sidewalk.com.
David, thank you very much.
Thanks a lot.
Glad to have you here. Now remember, you can win the Artifacts giveaway simply by being the 7th through the 11th caller to the City Cable 34 hotline. That's 673-2234, this CalcuPen set here. Now you do have to leave your name, address, and phone number on our answering machine because we need that to get back to you. Now Janet will be back in just a moment with Angie Hwong of Asian Media Access right after this scintillating art fact. Stay.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm Janet Zahn, and with me today is Angie Hwong, who is the Executive Director of Asian Media Access. Welcome.
Hi, Janet.
I'm glad you could take the time with us today.
Yes.
Tell me about Asian Media Access. It's a fairly new organization.
Yes.
How did it come about?
Asian Media Access is a nonprofit media arts organization. We started around 1993, and we have a few of us get together. We feel we really need a voice for Asian American community. So we're starting to put together a nonprofit organization called Asian Media Access. And we're trying to provide programs in different areas, such as we would like to have a media programs, which will have our own show, so we can cross over our message to the mainstream audience. Or we also would like to have some education possibility for our youth to let them know how they can utilize the media for their own voice. Another perspective, we would like to see how mainstream can also get a sense of Asian culture. So we have a movie exhibition program. So we kind of running in different directions, but the main point for the Asian Media Access is really to that Asian American voice heard in the society, and so also then we can participate in the decision-making level.
And also to let the mainstream audience be enriched by Asian culture.
Necessarily, yes.
Well, so you've got 3 programs. You've got your education program.
Yes.
And that sounds very exciting, and everything's growing. Tell us a little bit about the education component of this?
We have a media education component for Asian Media Access, centrally around a program called Asian American News Media Camp. We offer a yearly media camp for Asian American high school students, so they can come in to learn how to produce, such as this television program. So then they can produce one themselves. It's a 4 days training. They will learn video production, anchor and reporting, and news writing. And also we add another radio news this year, so they can learn all those skills and then produce a final production at the end of the camp.
Where is the camp?
At the St. Catherine College in the St. Paul.
Excellent, nice opportunity
Yes.
for kids, and important for them to
Yes.
be able to, like you say, participate in the broader media and the messages that are getting out so that Asian Americans are represented.
Definitely.
You also have a production side of all of this.
We have a monthly production. East Meets West is our main program. We run it monthly, and it's mixed with documentary and magazine show. We try to let all the audience around Twin Cities to know what is Asian American issue now, and or what is our programs, or what kind of community arts programs we have been able to offer from our Asian American community. Like last month, we just finished one regarding the immigration issue, because we do have anti-Asian American immigration bashing around the nation. So we did a piece about how Asian American contribution to the society, and that's a very successful piece for us. And by doing this production, we can really produce the program from Asian American angles, so that people know how we think about things, what is our real issue is, and also starting the communication at a very basic level. So people starting to realize what we think, then we can start to communicate, instead of have other people to interpret for us what Asian Americans think, what we say, but that's the message directly come from us.
That's part of what you're doing also with your exhibition program.
Definitely.
But it's a little different angle.
Yes.
It's popular culture.
Yes. On the same time, we keep thinking about, if we only focus on the Asian American issues, we may not get across to the mainstream. So another way to bridge this gap is trying to bring in a lot of Asian popular cultures through film. So to lure the mainstream audience to our movie theater to watch Asian films, to watch the films, they will get to know sense of how Asian American behave, where is our culture coming from, and to understand Asian American more through Asian films.
One of the things that you've got coming up later this fall in November is an Asian American Children's Animation Festival.
I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah.
We do have a great film coming up. It's called My Neighbor Totoro. It's a Japanese animation film. We're trying to put together a package of good Asian children films and to introduce to Twin Cities.
And just, I'm going to interrupt, because this might be the point where Edie would roll the tape so that you can explain, as we're seeing some of the animation, what this is all about, the film.
Okay.
So tell us a little bit more about the festival. Sorry to interrupt you.
Should I go ahead to talk about the My Neighbor Totoro or the film festival?
The My Neighbor Totoro.
Okay. My Neighbor Totoro is a Japanese animation film. It's talk about fairy tale for the young children. Two young children, they lost their mom, so they live with their dad in the countryside, and they always dream for support. And now they have a neighbor, Totoro, and Totoro always come when they need his help, and he will always show up. And he has a great component is a cat. With a cat bus, always come and take care of Totoro to every places. And also the kids will ride with the cat bus. So, but none of those would be seen by adults. So the adults won't know anything, but it's only through children's eyes it exists, the Totoro and also the cat bus. And both help the children to solve their daily problems and to help them to grow through the difficult time they have.
Sure. Does now, coming back to the festival then, there is difference in Asian animation film and Disney animation, for example. How would you describe that? How is it different?
For a lot of Asian animation, they don't have those evil versus good. It's always a situational setting. So you won't necessarily have a bad guy all the time from the film to the end. That's what typical the Disneys will do is have an evil force at the end and then come back, the good wins again.
Sure.
So in doing that transition, actually I don't think so the children perceive the evil force well. They usually refuse to see that part when it comes on the screen. Compared to the Asian animation, which they were trying to use a situational setting, for example, Totoro, their mother left them, so they have a very difficult time adjust to a new life. Now Totoro comes to help them, to comfort them, and play with them, so they would be able to go through that difficult time. Of course, they have up and down. They do have the sad moment, do have a difficult time, but they not necessarily have evil guys all through the film. So all through the films, they have all those good-hearted people trying to help everybody make mistake, and that's what Totoro come in to help the kids to smooth them out, let them know that's fine. So it's a lot of playing with the interpersonal relationship more, compared with what Disney setting is much more a good versus evil, such a simple setting of the world. Yeah,
clear cut.
Yeah.
And kids are more perceptive than that.
Yeah, kids are more like to see the world as an overall, which that's perceived in the Asian animation films. They like to see it as a very, very good and harmony. And they do have the situation happen. They cause them cry and make them sad, but they know they will have help from the different sides to go through it.
Sure. So the Animation Festival is in the first week of November, right?
Yes.
The Children's Film Festival.
And the Children's Film Festival would collaborate with the Metropolitan State University and will host it in the first week of November.
Okay, that sounds very exciting. And we just have a couple of minutes left, and I would like to set up the last clip that we're going to see as we close our segment is from a film called The Drunken Master 2. And this is kind of there's an interesting story behind it. So why don't you just go ahead and set it up?
We have Asian Media Access offer a midnight movie exhibition at the Riverview Theater. Every Friday and Saturday midnight we show Asian films. And the coming up film is called Drunken Master 2. And we have showed the film 2 years ago, and it's have tremendous popularity. That's why we bring it back. Last time we show it, one of the teacher after the film, she told me a very touching story. She told me she used to see her Laotian and Cambodian boys and play at the playground to have a drunken step. They use a drunken step and fight with one another. And she just feels so sad because she make assumption they must come from alcohol abusing families. But she doesn't realize this after she saw the film. Suddenly click on her. The kids are imitating their hero, Jackie. Jackie in the Drunken Master 2 has a Kung Fu style imitate the drunken steps. So what he is doing is all those drunken steps, and at the same time when he fights. So those kids are imitating him in the playground. Has nothing to do with the background or anything, just a popular culture within Asian American community, which she is not aware. She make that assumption, but after she saw the film, she realized how big mistake she made. So that's how popular culture can have an impact on all of us. And if I hope the mainstream audience will appreciate this opportunity, come to learn our Asian culture through films, hope they will more understand our Asian American community.
And be enriched by it.
Yes.
Before we go, I want to make sure people have the phone number for Asian Media Access, if you would give that out.
Yes, people can reach Asian Media Access at the phone number 349-2549, and that is 349-2549.
Great. Angie, it's been such a pleasure to meet you, and I'm so glad you came and talked to us about your programs. Congratulations on all of your success, and I wish you much more.
Thank you so much.
And now we are going to see the clip from The Drunken Master 2 as we leave. And again, thank you very much. After the clip, Phill will welcome Florence Hart of the Scottish Celtic Dance Association. And in case you just joined us, you're watching Artifacts, the show that brings the arts in Minneapolis home to you. Stay tuned.
重兵，醉酒提壶领先军。铁拐李，玄州七壮最还阵。汉中里，虽不报反我心宁。我就先人敬酒锁喉口。张国老醉酒破冰提连环。三彩河单骑敬酒来要破。韩湘子，秦万吉兄醉吹。
Well, that was an interesting look from one of the projects that Janet's guest was working on. My next guest is a woman who has done a lot of teaching in the Twin Cities community of Celtic dance, in particular Scottish dance. I want to introduce Florence Hart.
How do you do?
I do well, and it's good to have you on the show. I want to bet that a lot of our viewers are a bit surprised that there is a Minnesota Scottish Celtic Dance Association. How long have you guys been around?
Since 1967.
So you're celebrating 30 years now.
30 years, that's right.
Now I can tell just listening to you that you hail from that part of the world that we call Scotland.
That's correct, from Dunfermline.
And that is the home not only to yourself, but a famous person who came over to these shores and did some charitable work.
His name was Andrew Carnegie,
yes.
Or as you say, Carnegie.
Yeah, and I do say Carnegie, but it's Carnegie.
Carnegie.
Yeah, and he was charitable at the end of his life when he was giving out these tens of millions of dollars for the libraries. And you said he actually went back to his home community in Scotland.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Did some work there.
And there's a Carnegie Hall in Dunfermline, and a beautiful big park, and scholarships available for talented people.
Okay, so he maintained an interest then in his own heritage.
Yes, he did.
As you've done here on our shores, what brought you here from Bonnie, Scotland to this cold center of a continent that we call Minnesota?
Curiosity.
Just simply curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
And you've been teaching this particular dance form for how long?
Well, I taught in Scotland before I came over.
Oh, all right.
And then in 1961, when I arrived here, there were very few Scottish dancers. And so I started teaching Scottish country dancing first. And then they asked me if I'd teach their children Highland dancing, so I started teaching Highland dancing.
Okay, can you describe the difference? You just mentioned that there's the Highland dancing, and then there's national dancing. Is that different?
Yes.
And then country dancing.
Yes.
You've already mentioned that.
Well, country dancing is like your square dancing with steps, and it's done in groups of 8 people.
Okay.
And then the Highland dancing is on its own, individual. Where
Okay,
it's like
more
the
solo.
Yeah, like
effort.
the Highland fling and the sword dance.
Yes. Let's talk.
Shinters.
Can we talk a little bit about those different dances? Because I think for a lot of folks, they sort of blur. Most of us have probably heard of the Highland fling. What's the origin of that particular dance?
Well, long ago it was a dance of victory. The clansmen danced on their shield.
Yeah.
And they imitated a deer jumping and leaping. And the middle of the targe was the spike, so they had to stay away
They had to
from
be careful.
the spike.
Yeah,
Yes,
and the
they had to
targe
be
was the
careful.
shield itself, the traditional.
Yes, yes, it was. And nowadays, when the dancers do the Highland fling, they have to dance on the spot.
Okay, so
They
it's not
must stay on
forward
the
movement
spot.
here. This is
No,
not, yeah,
no.
it's
And
in place.
when they're in competition, the judge is watching very particularly that they stay on the one spot. When I was a little girl, my dad used to put down a half-crown piece, which is just about that size, and I had to hop on that piece. And then if I stayed on the piece, he would let me keep it.
You got the half
I
crown.
got to keep it.
Well, there's a
yeah.
payoff. I like that.
Yeah.
I'm going to not pronounce this well. Chanteuse?
Chanteuse.
Chanteuse. That's another dance.
Yes, that's Gaelic for old trousers. And after the 1745 rebellion, the Scots were not allowed to wear the kilt, and they had to wear the trews that the English soldiers wore. Okay. And they didn't like it because they were tight, you know. And then finally, 30 years later, when another king, George, came on the throne, he allowed them again to wear the kilt.
Back to the kilt.
So this dance commemorates tossing off the tight trousers and then the readorning of the kilt.
That's fascinating. Well, I would like at this point to introduce a couple of your students.
Sure.
You were kind enough to bring a couple of young people who you've been teaching.
Yes.
And I understand we have at least one of them is quite the international award winner. Maybe you could introduce them first and then talk about the outfits they're wearing, if you would.
Okay. Kira Cogswell is wearing a national outfit, and Brian Cogswell is wearing a Highland outfit. The Highland outfit is the kilt, as you can see, and he does the Highland fling, sword dance, chantreuse, and reel in that outfit. And when Kira does Highland, she wears that outfit too, with a velvet vest and no sporran, because that's only allowed to wear by the boys.
Okay.
And noble moral, which is on his head.
Which is on his head, okay.
Yeah. Now the national outfit is usually worn by dancers, and it's very balletic. It's very much like ballet, and so it's a softer type of dance. The Highland is more aggressive.
I understand, yes.
But
now, what Kira is wearing also, I asked earlier, what is the clan symbol of what she's wearing? And you said, well, that's a special one.
That's the bicentennial tartan.
Yes, the U.S. Independence bicentennial.
Yes, it came out in 1997.
It came out in 97?
1976.
76, okay. There was a different bicentennial, I think.
Sorry, 1976.
And what is Brian wearing here?
He's wearing the hunting Ross.
Okay, hunting Ross.
Hunting Ross.
Tartan there. And I understand that Kira is amongst your acclaimed competition winners.
That's right. This year she was second runner-up in the Nationals in Chesapeake Bay, and every year she's been a Midwest representative since she was 9 years old, and she's won medals over at the World Championship in Scotland. So
And she lives here. Both of these people obviously live
in
here
Egan,
in the Twin Cities area.
In
That's
Egan.
Great. And I understand Brian's been dancing merely a few years and is already quite accomplished.
Yes, he's been dancing 2 years.
That's great.
And it helps his soccer and it helps his footwork.
Good
and
foot control there,
foot
Brian?
control.
Well, I want to thank you both for coming and sharing that with us. Florence, what is it that you all are involved in? Obviously, you teach. These are a couple of your students. You're involved with competitions. You do some good charity work. Why don't you just outline for us some of the things that the Minnesota Scottish Celtic Dance Association is involved with?
Well, basically, they want to show the Scottish arts of Highland dance and promote in this area more Scottish arts. And also, they give scholarships for children, dancers that want to go to workshops, dance workshops, or to go to Scotland. We've been over to Scotland several times, and they get financial help.
Right.
We also have competitions out at the Renaissance in September, and McAllister Scottish Fair we're involved in.
And that's in the spring, as I recall.
In May.
In May,
first
right.
Saturday. And also at Landmark in February, we have a Scottish Ramble, and we perform at the Festival of Nations.
Okay, so you're really quite visible then if people want to come out and see
yes,
your
very
dancers
visible.
perform. Something I was curious to know too, how large in Minnesota or the Twin Cities is the Scottish community?
Well, I would say it's small in comparison to, say, the East Coast or even the West Coast. The Swedes outnumber us, obviously, and the Germans.
And the Germans in turn.
We keep our end up, you know.
Indeed.
We have a Burns night, Robert Burns.
The
I'm
great
sure
poet?
You've heard of
Now, what goes on there? Is that a reading of the classic poetry, or do folks get a chance to come in with their contemporary poetry?
No, it's
just a lot of reveling.
It's basically Robert Burns poems. And we have a traditional Scottish dinner of haggis
Well, that
and
sounds
steak
delicious.
pie. Well, I'm sure you'd like it.
Now, you've been eating haggis for quite a while, I take it. Is it good? Do you like it?
I like
Okay.
it.
If it's made well, I assume.
Yes, I
That's
like
good.
it.
Shall we tell the people what haggis is made of?
Well, it's oatmeal, liver, hearts of a sheep, all put together and cooked in the sheep's stomach.
See, I was with you right up through the oatmeal. That's the part I enjoy the most. That's
the
pretty
oatmeal.
good. That's right. Now, you mentioned the Renaissance Festival. So for our viewers that are watching this now, you've got a weekend coming up in...
September 6th.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fascinating. That's good. How many folks would one see on stage if they came to see a typical performance, or maybe a competition that you all are involved in?
Well,
how large is the...
for competition, there's only 3 up at a time.
At a given time,
Yeah,
okay.
and that's, they're divided into categories: beginners, novice, intermediate,
All right.
and premier.
Sure, but for the larger performances then?
Well, like at the Festival of Nations, we have about 22 young dancers that perform in the afternoon, and then maybe about 16 adults in the evening
Doing
show.
various dances, amongst the ones that you were describing
Yes,
earlier.
various
And as I
dances.
understand it, you are essentially the choreographer, you're the manager of that presentation?
Well, that particular one,
That
but there are
particular.
several teachers in the area now.
Oh, okay.
Yes, several young teachers that are doing well and just as interested as I am in promoting Highland dancing.
Great. And would most of them be involved with the
Yes,
Scottish Celtic
their
Dance
students
Association?
would be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. When I think of Scotland and the Scottish people, I think of the Celtic peoples, which obviously includes the Irish. Is there a connection between the traditions in terms of dance? Is there an overlap in the dance, or are they quite different? I know you've taught Irish dance as well.
Yes, I have.
Are they very different from one another, or quite similar?
I think they're different.
Yeah.
In the Highland, it's outward rotation of the knees and pointing the toes, and the basic positions are like ballet, you know, the 5 basic positions. Whereas in Irish dancing, the knees are straight forward,
All right.
and you work a lot from the ankle down.
Right.
You
And
know.
one of my stereotypes of the Irish dancing is that the arms move relatively little. Is that different in Highland dancing?
In Highland, they use their arms.
Okay, because I know I've seen them, I don't know the terms, but above the head and
Yes,
swinging
yeah.
a little bit like this.
Yes.
Now, do you yourself still get out and dance?
I do country dancing, but I don't do Highland.
Okay.
It's more for the young folks.
That's right. Are you finding a continuing interest on the part of young people? Are you getting calls or people, families saying,
Yes.
we want you to learn this,
Yes.
this sort of thing?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Now, after the Renaissance Festival, when would be the next opportunity people might see a competition?
A competition.
Yeah.
It would be at the Scottish Ramble in February.
In February at, where did you say, the
Landmark.
Landmark Center? Now, what
Landmark.
goes on at a ramble? What does the ramble imply? I think of something out in the greenswards and people are soon over the horizon.
Well, they have country dancing, they have Scottish foods, they have sell goods from Scotland.
Oh, all right.
And there's a kilt making class. If you want to learn how to make a kilt, you can
Truly.
have a person that comes in and shows you right from the piece of material, and by the end of the week you've got a kilt.
Well, that'd be a fascinating thing to do.
Even if you can't sew, you know,
Yeah,
because it's,
well,
all
I'm in
by,
that category.
it's all by hand.
That's right. Now,
No
I have to ask
machine.
this, you know, having a bit of the Lindsay in myself, I had to wear my Lindsay tartan tie
Yeah, I
here.
see that.
But for those of us that want to go out and find things Scottish, are there stores, shops in the metropolitan area that we can go?
There's one in Minnetonka.
Oh, all right, because I was thinking when you said to make a kilt, I mean, somewhere you have to get the materials.
Yes.
So you can
Well,
get
usually I would order it from Scotland, or there's a person here that would order for you.
All right, so that could
has
be done.
that store, yeah.
Now, we just have a moment left, and I know there is a phone number if people are interested in getting more information about the Minnesota Scottish Celtic Dance Association.
783-9438.
Right, and that's the phone number of your president.
President Dale Nicola.
Okay,
yes.
so people could call that and get a little information about
Yes.
upcoming events or the Ramble or whatever.
They could.
I want to thank Kira and Brian for being on, and Florence, it was a pleasure to learn more.
It was a pleasure to
Thank
meet you
to be
too.
here, for being here. Now, in just a moment, Janet will be back with me, and we'll close out the show with at least a couple tantalizing arts news tidbits. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Well, another fine show.
As usual.
Angie had a lot of interesting things going on there.
She is a fascinating person. I really enjoyed meeting her.
They're doing good work at that
They are.
Asian
Oh,
Media
and
Access.
I don't want to forget to say thank you to Angie for supplying us with 5 of these, which you could win.
That's
you know.
right.
All you have to do is call the hotline.
673-2234. You know, it's solar powered.
It is.
So-
So it works really well in here. I'm telling you.
Cyberspace and outer space,
Yeah.
all on Artifacts. You know, at the end of the show, we like to talk about upcoming events and things like that. And of course, we have a calendar of events you can catch at the very tail end of the show.
Yes.
We did want to mention the Mill City Music Fest, which will be going on over Labor Day weekend. So check that out. Lots of good
Great.
music.
3 days of music downtown.
Gospel, blues, rock and roll.
Fun.
Now, earlier in August is the 1997 Play Labs over at the Playwrights Center, and I just thought we'd rattle off a couple of descriptions that they sent us of some of the plays that you might be able to take part in here. Straight as a Line, and here's the description of that. In the neon glow of the Las Vegas Strip, Paulie, a handsome young man with a Jones for the phone, and his mother, a British expatriate turned casino hostess, play out a poignant, fiercely funny vaudeville routine to fend off their fears in the face of death. Now, the other play they've got going is
Given Fish, written by Melissa James Gibson. On a New York City block, twin brothers Art and Lou search for meaning in lasagna and taxidermy.
Yes.
Ivy and Latimer find it during a game of Go Fish. Ollie listens through her apartment wall to Marina, who is having a lover's quarrel over the intercom, while a film about the fate of a man who loves the wife of a fisherman flickers across her window shade.
Then there's Madam Killer by Honor Kane. In turn-of-the-century New York, women from all walks of life appear at the door of a mysterious lady abortionist. Her powerful pills will purge bodies of unwanted children, but the passions of the women themselves are far harder to control. As the fevers of love, betrayal, and suspicion rise around her, she must choose between the love of her life and the lives of her patients.
That's some good stuff.
Yeah.
It really sounds
Turgid
great.
almost.
And wonderfully written.
Yes, I know.
Promo copy.
It'll kind of grab you.
Yeah.
So, well, listen, do call the events calendar. Watch the events calendar. Get your pencils, write down the events that are going on. Call the City Cable hotline here, 673-2234, if you want to find out more about the guests we've had on the show. And if you have any suggestions for things you might want us to cover, send us your newsletters, your calendars of events. We'd like to
And
make
you can
use
call
of
the
them.
hotline too, leave your name and address and a phone number, and you can win the CalcuPen. I had to do that.
I thought that was a dental implement or something, a CalcuPen here.
Oh no, and it's fabulous.
That's
So,
great. Well, thank you for watching Artifacts. I'm Phill Lindsay.
And I'm Janet Zahn.
We'll see you next time.